Welcome to this explainer, where we're diving into the century-long, absolutely fascinating evolution of West Virginia University's Mountaineer Field. You know, if you've ever stood shoulder to shoulder with 60,000 roaring fans in Morgantown on game day, it's honestly almost impossible to imagine this entire program starting out on a bumpy patch of grass.
But, well, that's exactly what happened. It's this incredible story of growth, community, and infrastructure that begins way, way before the modern concrete colossus we know today. To truly wrap our heads around the sheer scale of what Mountaineer Field is now, we have to look back at how the very architecture of college sports literally had to explode in size to keep pace with the game's popularity. Picture this. In 1891, the very first WVU football game was played in an actual pasture. We're talking maybe 250 fans rolling up in horse-drawn carriages. Yet, fast forward barely 30 years, and an undefeated season in 1922 sparked this massive, undeniable demand for a permanent facility. This directly led to the rapid construction and 1924 opening of a concrete stadium. It just goes to show you how quickly the program evolved from a tiny local gathering into a massive statewide phenomenon during the golden age of sports.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1. The Golden Age arrives, from pastures to splinters. To really understand this journey, we've got to look at the humble, highly improvised beginnings of Mountaineer football. Before concrete, they had wood, and before that they had, well, whatever open fields they could find. Their first semi-permanent home was affectionately, or maybe notoriously known as Splinter Stadium. Located right where the current Mountain Layer parking lot sits today, this 10,000-seat wooden bleacher facility was exactly what it sounds like. It was infamous for cheap, splinter-prone seating. And hey, while it definitely gave the team a home, it was a far cry from the massive, permanent structures popping up at other universities across the country.
And the push to replace Splinter Stadium? It was incredibly grassroots. Imagine this. During one early game, a sudden downpour completely soaked the handwritten donation pledges they were actively collecting from fans. The ink ran, the paper turned to absolute mush, and the staff were forced to literally throw away those crucial financial commitments. This localized, almost makeshift nature of early fundraising really highlighted the desperate need for a professional, permanent facility, especially after Coach Doc Spears led the team to that spectacular undefeated season in 1922. They knew they needed a real home.
Moving right along to Section 2, Jewel of the Mountains, excavating Falling Run Ravine.
So Athletic Director Harry Stansberry steps up and spearheads an incredibly ambitious project to build a permanent home right in downtown Morgantown. This was the birth of the original Mountaineer Field. And honestly, the most interesting thing about it is the price tag, $500,000. Now, in the 1920s, that was a staggering sum of money. But what's truly remarkable here is that this was raised almost entirely through micro-donations and subscriptions from everyday West Virginia citizens back in 1923. It wasn't just one wealthy benefactor cutting a massive check. It was a true grassroots community effort. It proved just how deeply the state cared about its mountaineers.
Building this thing was an absolute engineering marvel for its era. Stansberry selected the Falling Run Ravine because, well, it was super close to the railroad, but it was incredibly steep, rugged terrain. They literally had to excavate it using a mix of steam shovels and actual horse-drawn wagons. Finally, they built a square-cornered concrete horseshoe directly into the valley's natural walls. They basically wedged a massive 34,000-seat stadium tightly between existing campus buildings like Woodburn Hall. It was an unbelievable feat of spatial compression.
And all that hard work paid off big time. On September 27, 1924, WVU christened the new stadium by beating West Virginia Wesleyan 21-6. A massive 16,000 fans showed up, making it the largest sporting event crowd in the state's entire history at that time. The stadium, which they dubbed the Jewel of the Mountains, was just an instant success.
But things change, right? Let's get into Section 3, Outgrowing the Ravine, crumbling concrete, and the big move.
As the decades passed and college football just exploded in popularity, the beloved downtown stadium started turning into a bit of a logistical nightmare. The very geography that made it this amazing, intimate amphitheater eventually became its absolute undoing. See, after World War II, an interstate boom, specifically the construction of I-79 and Route 48, connected Morgantown to the rest of the state like never before. Suddenly, massive crowds could actually commute to the games. Back in the 1950s, fans happily stayed home to listen to the legendary Jack Fleming call the game on the radio. But by the 1970s, these new highway systems brought thousands to a stadium that was completely unequipped to handle them.
I mean, it was totally landlocked by buildings and offered absolutely zero public parking. None.
And beyond the parking nightmare, the facility itself was literally rotting away. One former player recalled, and I quote, "The weight room was literally a cave underneath the bridge, and you walked in there and it was like a dungeon." By the 1970s, the players were living with visceral decay. They even joked that their facilities felt like something straight out of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, where they could peek through these tiny holes and watch students walking to class right above them.
And it wasn't just the weight room. Concrete would literally fall from the ceiling when players slammed down their weights. Imagine being an opposing team, like Penn State, arriving at the stadium. You step off your nice bus and your sharp, tight blazers, only to be greeted by rotting wood, chipped paint, and the constant drip, drip, drip of water in this claustrophobic, crumbling environment. It was painfully clear that something had to change.
So administrators faced a massive dilemma. Option 1 was a $10 million compromise to build an upper deck right over Campus Drive. But, that didn't solve the parking issue at all. Option 2 was a painful but necessary choice. Spend $22 million, abandon the historic downtown site entirely, and build a brand new 50,000-seat stadium on an old golf course over on the Evansdale campus.
Before that new chapter could officially begin, the old stadium had one last hurrah. 38,681. That was the overcapacity, record-breaking crowd that somehow wedged into the crumbling downtown stadium on November 10, 1979. It was the final game ever played there, a bittersweet battle against their arch-rival Pitt. The stadium was practically bursting at the seams, proving once and for all that they had definitely outgrown the ravine.
Now for the final stretch. Section 4, a new era dawns, the sprint to Milan Puskar Stadium.
Governor J. Rockefeller and university leaders ultimately chose the future, setting the stage for a frantic race against the clock. And when I say a race, I mean a literal sprint. The brand new 50,000-seat stadium was completed in just 18 months. Governor Rockefeller even threatened the project managers with a $1,000 daily fine if it wasn't ready for the 1980 season opener. Construction out on the old golf course pushed right down to the wire. They were fighting through summer rainstorms, and get this, the AstroTurf was laid down a mere 8 days before the first kickoff. Crazy, right?
But they made it. On September 6, 1980, the new Mountaineer Field officially opened its doors. And what an opening it was. Singer John Denver was actually there in person, leading 50,000 ecstatic fans in a rousing rendition of Take Me Home Country Roads to dedicate the stadium. It was a spectacular rebirth for the program under new head coach Don Nehlen, officially ushering in the modern era of WVU football.
When we look at the numbers, the whole theme of our explainer becomes undeniable. We go from a meager 10,000 seats at Splinter Stadium to the 38,000 peak at Old Mountaineer Field, all the way up to the 60,000-plus capacity at today's Milan Puskar Stadium. As the sport grew from this tiny local pastime to a massive cultural and commercial institution, the architecture absolutely had to scale up to match it.
Now, as for the old stadium back in the ravine, well, it sat empty for a few years, mostly just used by sunbathing students and occasionally the marching band. It was finally raised in 1987. But even though the concrete is long gone, its legacy absolutely lives on in the very geography of the downtown campus. Today, the Life Sciences Building and Field Hall occupy the exact footprint of the old North and South stands, and there's even a horseshoe monument remaining on site to mark its historical impact.
Which brings us to our final thought. We've traced this incredible journey from wooden splinters in a ravine to a modern colossus that is currently seeing $150 million in upgrades. As we watch these massive stadiums essentially become the largest cities in their states on game day, it leaves us wondering, how will the spaces we celebrate in today continue to evolve tomorrow? I mean, what will the next 100 years of sports infrastructure even look like? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deeper look at the architecture of sports sparked your curiosity as much as it did mine. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.